This has certainly been a precarious year in Canada's job market. We got word yesterday with a seasonal adjustment. EI hit a record in October in Canada as a lot of people got switched over from the CERB onto regular EI. Yesterday, the province announced some changes to their Infectious Disease Emergency Leave regulation. It has been extended from January the 2nd, 2021 to July the 3rd for thousands of Ontario workers. It attempts to allow employers to make changes to their employees' jobs and put them on layoff due to COVID-19 without facing any constructive dismissal claims or payouts on severance packages. Now, you can always dig in if you know what you're doing on this one and get more of a sense of what it's going to mean for working people in Ontario who may face layoff throughout 2021. That's why we welcome Lior Samfiru on the line. He's host of the Employment Law Show right here on Global News Radio 640 Toronto, and he's a partner in Samfiru Tumarkin Law Practices. Lior, always a pleasure. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and by the way, it's great to have you back on air.
Appreciate that, Lior. It's been a while. All right, explain this to us. What was in place, and what did yesterday's regulation replace that with?
So the Ontario government back in the spring instituted this Infectious Disease Emergency Leave, the idea being to try to give employers some breathing room and flexibility by allowing them to make changes that they normally would not be able to make, as well as by allowing to put essentially people on a layoff without having to pay severance, without having to pay termination pay. Now, that period initially was going to end in July of this year of 2020. It was then extended until January of 2021, and then now it's been extended again until July. Well, this means a few things. First of all, it means that individuals can still be, at any time between now and July, can be put on a layoff or could have their job changed, and there's really not much that they'll be able to do subject to what I'm about to tell you. But the other thing it means is for individuals that have been off, and many have been since March already of this year, and they thought, okay, at least there's an end date, January, we'll either be back to work or at least I'm going to get my severance. That now has been extended until July, but it gets worse because come July, assuming this infectious disease emergency leave ends, at that point, the employer can actually try to put the employee on a proper temporary layoff, and that layoff can last for another 8 months.
Whoa.
So you may have an employee that's been off since March 2020 who with this scheme could now be off until March 2022. That's 2 full years, which is, it's unheard of in my view. So everything I just told you sounds pretty bad, I think, for employees. But here's how this actually works properly or practically speaking. What this means, everything I just told you, it means that if the employee chooses for it to happen or allows for it to happen, accepts it, the employer can do it. But the employee does not have to. The employee could still choose to treat this under what we call our common law system as a termination of employment, being put on this leave, and choose to force the issue of severance. And I think a lot of employees who thought and expected they'll be back to work in January, now in the sense they're being pushed into having to do this, because who can afford to be off potentially another 12 months or however many more months? That's not going to be practical for many employees. So you still, as an employee, have the ability and the option to say, enough is enough. I'm treating this as a termination.
Yeah, you have to be either extremely patient or extremely uninformed to realize your rights here.
It really is. It's one of those things where you're getting conflicting information because on the one hand, government saying, "Hey, here's the new rules, here's the law. You're on ice essentially at least until July of next year." That said, we have a different legal system that's separate from what the government does, which is our common law system governed by our courts, which is just as binding, as just as powerful. And that provides for different recourse for employees. So it can be very misleading or confusing, I should say, for employees trying to figure out what their rights are in this very difficult situation.
All right, Lior, are there different kinds of layoffs? Because, I've known guys who work at the auto plants in the GTA, and sometimes in the summer they'll just lay them off for 3 weeks. They'll pick up a piece of EI, and they will come back to work, versus a layoff when you don't know when you're coming back?
So there's certain jobs, certain industries where a layoff is part of the deal. You expect it. It's something that you understand. Either the job is seasonal or there's a specific period of time during which you're not going to have work. It's a temporary layoff, and that's what it's designed to do, to allow those jobs that are specific in their time frame to make those changes. But many people are put on a layoff saying, well, we don't know when we're going to call you back, if and when, and we're simply going to keep you out there at home until we figure that out. That is not what the law agrees with or what the law allows to do. If your job is not the type of job that's inherently seasonal, an employer does not have an automatic right to lay you off temporarily, meaning you can choose not to accept that and to treat that as a termination of employment. One other thing I'll say, some people now during COVID-19 have already been laid off more than once. So maybe during the first wave, came back to work, and now are finding themselves going off on a layoff again. The problem with that is this. Once you've been laid off that first time and you've accepted it by coming back to work, now you've given the company the right to do it again.
Oh.
And when they do it the second or third time, you don't really have a choice in the matter. That's why it is so important when it comes to layoffs, understand what your rights are, understand what you could be giving up if you accept it. A lot of people are now in very, very difficult situations.
Absolutely. But if you really love that job, Lior, does that influence people? And you know what? Okay, another layoff's coming, but I don't want to lose this job.
Mike, I agree with that. But here's with the scheme that's currently being put forward by the Ontario government, I think people are going to be left with no choice. If one of the choices, I love this job, so I want to go back, but I have to potentially wait 2 years just to find out if I'm going to go back to work. A lot of people are going to say, that's just too much. That's just too long. As much as I love the job, I'm better off getting my severance and maybe finding a job somewhere else that's similar. I don't think many people are going to be able to want to wait that long.
Yeah, you got to dismiss yourself from the emotions and just look at the fact. I mean, have some employers, in your experience, Lior, and I listened to you on the weekend with John, and we certainly took a lot of great phone calls in the spring. Are there some employers taking advantage of Regulation 228?
I really hate saying that, but I've seen it, so I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't happen. A lot of employers that were ready, willing, and able to pay severance because they knew they're not calling someone back are saying, well, wait a second, if we can defer this problem, then that's great. And maybe in the meantime, the employee is going to forget about it, find another job, and save us a bunch of money. So I do think that's happening. They may, one of the ways the government could have dealt with that, just like with the CERB, to qualify for the CERB, you needed to show some financial need. There had to be some nexus between the need and the benefit. I think an employer to qualify for the ability to put these employees off for so long would have to show some financial need, that there really is no choice for that employer. That hasn't happened, so employers can simply use that, and some have.
All right, last question, Lior. I do have an opportunity to return to work. It's the same name on the paycheck, but the job's different. Is that considered cause to seek termination pay?
So despite the regulation that it's been imposed by the government, at common law, as I said, a significant change to the terms of employment is still something you can treat as a constructive dismissal. Now, that's not true for every change. We have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. Some changes, if they're significant, if it's a demotion, if it does impact your pay or hours of work, can absolutely be a constructive dismissal. If it's a change in title only or with a very minor change in pay, probably not. But that is certainly something employees should keep in mind and get some advice on if they're facing a change like that.
If we don't talk, enjoy your holiday period, Lior. I'm sure we'll talk in the new year.
All the best, Mike. Take care.
Take care. That's Lior Samfiru, employment lawyer with Samfiru Tumarkin, host of the Employment Law Show here on this radio station.